gospel of Christ. Thanks, Spirit. Amen. If I had to name the 10 people I have met who had made the biggest impressions on my life, it would be difficult. There would be friends, family, and mentors, all competing for a spot. But one person who would be guaranteed a place on the list would be my friend Sam. I have known some fairly unconventional people, individuals who simply did not fit into the mould into which society expected them to fit. And Sam was certainly one of them. With shocking peroxide hair, which was not as common then as it is now, and clothing that made a strong statement even by today's standards, Sam turned heads everywhere. And I've not yet told you that Sam was a woman from a time not that long ago when it was seemingly more outrageous for a woman to rebel against the norms of society than it was for a man. Meeting Sam for the first time could be an interesting experience. She could come across as being very militant, yet the only times I ever knew Sam to become really angry were when issues of social justice were at stake, when people who could not speak up for themselves were being exploited. I also knew her well enough to know that behind her sometimes brash exterior was an individual who was not only selflessly compassionate, but also quite vulnerable. I do not actually know how Sam would have labelled her spiritual identity, but back then we did not overly concern ourselves with labels. It was our ethical principles and how well we followed them that really mattered. I would say, though, that she would have not been especially keen on the label Christian, mainly because of the hypocrisy I've seen in some people who like to apply that label to themselves. Sam did, however, have a special fondness for Mary. Her flat in Newtown was filled with beautiful pictures, icons, and little statues of Mary, all of which she treated with genuine reverence. Sam's occupation on the electoral roll was saint, but I do not think she was trying to be funny. Rather, it was a statement of her innate desire to do good. And her life probably came closer to my understanding of saintliness than that of anybody else I have known. Sam had many varied talents. She was a poet, a musician, and a filmmaker, but it was for her voluntary work with the more vulnerable and dispossessed members of society that I held her in the highest esteem. Organisations like City Mission do wonderful work with the homeless and the marginalised, but Sam took her ministry to places that City Mission could never reach. She would have been too modest to have realised it, but Sam's work was a powerful revelation of Christ in word and action. She provided love and care to some of society's most rejected and despised people, such as street prostitutes, drug addicts, and people with AIDS. One night, she asked me if I'd like to accompany her on her rounds through some of the murkier enclaves of Cuba Street. I was not overly keen, but I found myself saying yes. We walked through dark streets and alleyways and met various people, but I must confess, I would have preferred to avoid it. After all, it is not a good look to be seen talking to prostitutes in shop doorways in the middle of the night. However, I needn't have worried. They all knew Sam, who was right at home with them. And she seemed to understand their fears and insecurities and made sure that they were as well as could be in the circumstances. An older transsexual summed up quite succinctly that night by telling her that she was an angel. An angel she might well have been, But Sam, a young woman with so much to give, died tragically at the age of 31. Jesus had no qualms about mixing with those who were outcasts. In today's Gospel reading, he encountered a Canaanite woman who wanted Jesus to help her afflicted daughter. This passage is perhaps one of the more misunderstood sections of the Gospel and needs careful consideration. Jesus was in the districts of Tyre and Sidon, meaning that he was outside of Jewish territory, and as a Canaanite, the woman was an ancestral enemy of the Jews. Even though Jesus was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, he had gone out of his comfort zone into a foreign land, and in doing so foreshadowed the coming mission of the church to the whole world. The section of this reading that causes us so much difficulty is Jesus' response to the Canaanite woman's plea for help, which is usually translated as something like, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." To be called a dog then, as it is now, is a great insult, and not what we would have expected to have come from the lips of Jesus. The Greek word for dog in this passage, and its equivalent in Mark, is kainarion, which is perhaps better translated as little dog or pet dog. Unfortunately, English Bible translations usually translate this word as simply dog, and this has caused considerable confusion. Elsewhere in the New Testament where dogs are mentioned, such as when Jesus talks about not giving to dogs that which is sacred, the Greek word kion is used, which really does mean an unclean wild dog. So, contrary to what most English Bible translations seem to imply, Jesus does not call anybody a dog, but something closer to pet. Note that the Canaanite woman's response was hardly that of one who had just been gravely insulted. Instead, she made a clever retort. "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Jesus clearly appreciated her spiritual response, not to mention the faith and persistence that she demonstrated, and her request was granted. Not only did Jesus mix with those who were considered outcasts, but he was comfortable in doing so. And this made those people confident and relaxed enough to open themselves up to him. As members of Christ's body, the church, we too must show true compassion to those who need it. We are all called to be ministers, and my definition of ministry is revealing Christ in word and action. Having compassion for society's most rejected and despised people is a powerful demonstration that unconditional love really is available to everyone. Each of those whom the world seems to have forgotten is a person who deserves to be loved and respected. To serve them as Christ did is a privilege more than a duty, and one that truly brings us closer to him. Every one of us has our own individual districts of Tyre and Sidon and alleyways of Cuba Street. When did we last visit them?